Hey everybody, I'm Missy.
And I'm April.
And this is SheelaNaGig. Welcome to SheelaNaGig. Of course, each week we explore a woman whose strength, perseverance, innovation,
integrity, courage.
Yes,
all that
inspires
good stuff.
us. All that good stuff inspires us. We want to really give these ladies some light. It could be somebody you've heard of, and maybe you'll learn just a little bit more. But it could be something you've never heard of.
But you should know.
You should know about them, right?
Yeah.
Totally.
All
okay.
right.
So thanks for being here.
Where are we?
We're in April's backyard in Santa Clarita, California.
It's 90
beautiful.
degrees, but it's gorgeous
No, we're in
here.
the shade. She has this really nice little
Gazebo. Yeah.
porchy thing,
Yeah.
and we're kind of here out of desperation.
Yep, definitely desperation.
I threw our plans off a little bit today because I went down the rabbit hole with my Sheela, and it took way more time than I expected. I started yesterday, but I didn't finish in time to get here earlier, and that kind of screwed things up. So.
Well, and now my husband's home, and he's a CPA, and the house has to be quiet, and we like to make noise, so...
Yeah, I'm really noisy. I think I drive him a little crazy. Like, I was hesitant to use the bathroom just now, but I did go in and do it. I kind of hid those.
In all fairness, it's a short ride to his crazy.
Well, yeah.
So what you should know, listeners, is if you hear some weird sounds like our neighbors taking out their trash or some kids playing.
It's joyful.
It is.
I actually love it. She's got these little lights, and you know what? We're having a vodka martini in a can.
In a can, yes.
Vodka martini in a can.
They're wonderful. I totally
it's late in the
them.
afternoon. What is it, like 5 o'clock or something?
Yeah.
So this is kind of an unusual episode of SheelaNaGig, I'm going to say.
Oh, well, I can't wait to find out why. I know you're super excited about this one.
I am super excited. I'm super excited about her because she's had kind of an impact on my life. It's something I've always loved, and I hadn't given it a lot of thought until I started kind of exploring this tributary, this path. And I guess I'll just dive in, and my son is actually a big part of this path too.
All right, this is officially intriguing.
Okay.
I'm intrigued.
Today I'm talking about Rose O'Neill. She was an illustrator, a sculptor, a designer, an artist, a novelist, a poet, philanthropist, and a businesswoman.
Oh my God, she's a true Sheela because she's done 1,600 things except work in the dead letter office.
And she worked in the dead letter. I'm going to find one that worked in the dead letter office. I am, April.
Sorry, SheelaNaGig keeps coming back in my brain. I'm letting it go.
It's okay.
But most of our Sheelas do 247 things.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm not done yet. So that's just the beginning. Okay. So she was actually the highest paid woman illustrator of the early 20th century. And she is considered the first American woman cartoonist.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay.
Which, is near and dear to my son's heart, of course. He's studying to be an animator and loves cartoons and animation. And I think this kind of exposing him to her artwork at an early age
inspired him.
Mm-hmm. I think so. We talked about that a little bit. But most importantly, she was the first person ever to build a merchandising empire from her work with her innovation of the Kewpie doll.
Oh, of the Kewpie doll. Okay.
Do you know what a Kewpie doll is?
Yes, a lot has been explained because Missy called me today to say she's going to be late. She's going down the rabbit hole.
I couldn't even talk to her actually. I texted her.
No, right. It wasn't.
She wanted to talk to me, and I said I can't talk to you.
No, I can't talk. I'm in the rabbit hole. I can't have human contact. I'm just in my. But one of the things I know about Missy is she loves Kewpie dolls.
I love Kewpie dolls.
I should have seen this coming. Okay.
I honestly didn't know how special she was. I knew that I loved Kewpie dolls, but I didn't know how special the creator, Rose O'Neill, really was.
But just for
which
people
makes it even more exciting for me.
Who might not know what a Kewpie doll is, why don't you explain it? I'm sure I couldn't do as well as you.
So, these Kewpie dolls, they were big in the early part of the 20th century, and they kind of blew up overnight, as you will find out from this story. But they were these little cherubic dolls, these little cherubic, naked, smiling, adorable little chubby dolls
with their hair standing up.
They had a little top knot on their head, And
their hair stood straight up.
Now you're talking about trolls.
Okay.
Their hair doesn't stick straight up. They have a little top knot thing going on.
Okay. All right. I stand corrected.
Okay. And they're just adorable as can be. And yeah, so I'll give you more description later, but I think anybody our age knows what a Kewpie doll, but perhaps some of you who are younger might not know what a Kewpie doll is. It's possible. Go look it up. It's Kewpie. And probably when you see it, you'll say, oh, yeah, I've seen that image before, because it's
they're pretty iconic.
It's iconic, and it's been reinterpreted. So when my son was a toddler, I had already loved Kewpie dolls. And I have so many. But I want to say, even people who have never heard of Rose O'Neil have heard of Kewpie dolls, the most widely known character until Mickey Mouse came along.
Oh my goodness, I never knew that, but I did know that Kewpie dolls were pretty ubiquitous.
Oh yeah. And the Kewpie doll and its merchandise bearing its likeness still remain collectibles to this day. I have many.
I know you do. You know, when I first came to Missy's home, she said to me, I'm not a minimalist. I love my things, and she does. But the one thing I'll say is that they're very artfully displayed. They're not just like a bunch of stuff shoved into every shelf. Every little piece has been placed with love. It doesn't feel like this overwhelming collection. It feels like everything displayed has a very special place and has beauty in its position in your home.
Thank you for saying that.
Just my little tangent.
I have a lot of little collections.
She does. A lot of little collections.
But so when my son was a toddler, I stumbled upon a book at, I believe, the thrift store, and it was called the Kewpie Primer. And I thought, this is so great. And it was a little storybook about Kewpies. And I thought it was, the illustrations were darling, the little stories. And it's kind of funny because last night my son said, what are you working on? He knew I was working on my Sheela. And I said, oh my gosh, do you remember that Kewpie book we used to read? And he said, you mean the Kewpie Primer? He knew what it was called immediately.
Aww.
So
Nolan.
he said, oh, I love the Kewpie Primer. I said, we both loved it. We loved, the pictures. And then he said, do you remember Dirty Butt Cheeks? And then I remembered Dirty Butt Cheeks, which was a Kewpie. He really wanted a Kewpie of his own. And I found Dirty Butt Cheeks at a thrift store. Again, I'm a big thrifter. And it was a Kewpie doll with Dirty Butt Cheeks.
What else would Dirty Butt Cheeks
so,
have?
of course, I named it Dirty Butt Cheeks, and I gave it to my, 3-year-old son. And my husband
The other mothers must love you.
They did. Oh, there's a lot of good stories there, but no. My husband, why did you have to call it Dirty Butt Cheeks? But my son thought it was extremely funny too. He thought that was really funny.
I'm sure he did.
And we did try to, it was kind of embedded with a little bit of dirt on its butt cheeks. We tried to, wash it off the best we could, but he loved Dirty Butt Cheeks. And he slept with Dirty Butt Cheeks in his bed, and he would always make sure that Dirty Butt Cheeks was with us when we were reading the Kewpie Primer. And it just became a thing. So, back to Rose, though. Back to Rose O'Neil.
Yes.
Because I'm not done talking about everything she did.
Yeah.
She was also a suffragette and a women's rights leader working with Eleanor Roosevelt. And she was a total original individualist. She was a true Renaissance woman, of course.
Of course.
And the Kewpie doll was her most prestigious accomplishment. But she also produced sculptures, novels, poetry, you name it. It is endless.
Wow.
It is endless how many things she produced. So,
and I love that she was entrepreneurial.
Oh, so entrepreneurial. She was very
A lot of times
smart.
Artists aren't, great at monetizing art, but it sounds like she was queen of that as well.
To start with, yes. So Rose Cecile O'Neil was an iconoclast in every sense of the word. She was also a self-taught career woman, self-taught bohemian artist who ascended to the top in a thoroughly male-dominated field at that time. Rose O'Neil was original, she was eccentric, she had just this real childlike joy about her. She was generous to a fault, and she was beautiful, humorous, and she was strong. And I will take this moment to say, go look at pictures of this beautiful woman because when I looked at her, I was just, I was filled with warmth and love. I mean, you look at her sweet face, and immediately you're just filled with this beautiful warmth. And then I think everybody recognized that about her. And then her Kewpies, of course, really kind of brought that to the next level as well. So I also want to say, I think I'm in love with her. Do you remember Jen Hitchcock saying that she was in love?
Yes, with her Sheela that she presented.
Sheela at that time, Emily Hahn.
I remember that so vividly.
I feel like I'm a little bit in love. And maybe that's part of the problem that it took me so long. I feel like I'm a little bit in love with Rose O'Neal.
Well,
I'm going to admit that.
There's something to be said for falling in love with our Sheelas.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm kind of in love with her.
Well, why
maybe
not?
we would have dated if I met her back in the 20s or something. But anyway, so here we go. She was born on June 25th, 1874 in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. Her parents were William Patrick Henry and Alice Cecilia Senia Smith O'Neal. Her mom went by Mimi. I would have too if my name was that long. Her father was a bookseller of Irish descent who loved literature, art, and theater. Her mother was a gifted musician, actress, and teacher. And O'Neal revealed her talents and love for art and writing at a very young age. Rose was the second eldest child with two sisters, Lee and Callista, and three younger brothers, Hugh, James, and Clarence. And when she was a toddler, she traveled with her family in a covered wagon to rural Battle Creek, Nebraska, to try their hand at farming. Her father was also looking to avoid the bill collectors that he could not pay at this point.
Aww.
Isn't it rad that she traveled in a covered wagon?
Right, yeah. For us, that sounds so romantic and has such a alluring mystique to it. But I guess back in the day, that was how families migrated. Yeah, things aren't working out in this state. Let's just pack up in our covered wagon and outrun the bill payers.
That's right. See, April, there's not that much difference between her dad and Liz Carmichael. Let's just say.
Okay, we're going to go down the Liz
No, we're not.
Carmichael.
Okay. But the farming venture was fairly short-lived, and by the time Rose was 7, the O'Neal family then relocated to Omaha, Nebraska, where they would spend the next 12 years. But unfortunately, money continued to be tight, and the family kind of lived in this isolated rural community. But she grew up in this extremely loving and supportive family, which I find pretty amazing. Because a lot of times we hear about our Sheelas who really escaped kind of a darkness or
terrible,
or they were in poverty, and that also brought in a lot of other things like abuse or seclusion. And I don't feel that was the case with her. I felt like she came from a very loving family, and they actively and progressively supported each other's artistic and intellectual interests.
Nice.
And her personality was kind of a blend of her father's impractical nature and her mother's common sense. And she was already drawing at a really, really young age. She was this self-taught artist, and she was absolutely just obsessed with her dad's illustrated art books. And because he was an art dealer, he had a lot of them. So she would just kind of sit on the floor as a child and just try to copy some of these drawings, and she was just absolutely enamored.
Wow.
So Rose and her siblings were strongly encouraged in the arts, and they practiced reciting Shakespeare together. They read the classics, and they frequently attended theatrical performances.
Oh, nice. Which I guess back in the day, maybe theater was a lot more accessible.
I guess it was.
Yeah, I mean, now it's like a rich person's pleasure. Tickets have become so expensive.
It's true. Maybe they were ushers. My mom was always an usher at the Fisher Theater in downtown Detroit.
Stephen's aunt does that too.
Just so she at the Fisher.
I think so.
Probably it's the Fisher. Yeah, just so she could see stuff for free.
Oh.
I remember I got to see Annie when I was probably like 10, and she put makeup on me and dressed me up and just said, "Don't worry, they'll think you're older. You're going to get to see it for free."
Oh, how fun.
But really, I was just completely confused and put people in the wrong seats. It was very stressful, actually. Anyway, I digress. But she was considered crafty, gifted. She was ambitious. And she sporadically attended a school called the Sacred Heart Academy in Omaha. But because her family was living at this poverty level, she and her siblings were able to attend for free, which was kind of nice. They had free tuition, so they were able to get access to pretty good education despite that. But they didn't always go because they were teased. So because they were poor and everybody knew they were poor, it also led to a lot of bullying of Rose and her siblings by the neighborhood adults and children.
Oh, how sad.
Shame on those adults especially.
Right?
That's horrible. But at the age of 13 came this huge turning point in Rose's young life. She ended up entering a contest. It was a children's drawing contest sponsored by the Omaha World Herald, and she entered a sketch called Temptation Leading Down in an Abyss.
Ooh.
What 13-year-old
I was going to say, that's a little heady for a 13-year-old, right?
Think about it. You look back at some of these women or some of these girls, and they're so mature.
Yeah, that's kind
They're
of
so
blowing
ahead
me
of their time.
away.
My daughter's 11, and my daughter's very smart, but I can't imagine she would ever come up with that kind of name.
Yeah, that's pretty...
one of her pieces of work.
Yeah. I mean, my daughter's 21 and no slouch. I respect her deeply, but wow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right.
So she entered this. I think her dad was both her parents were really supportive of her, but I think it was kind of her dad's idea. He had heard about this and said, you should enter some of your artwork into this. And she was quite young, too. I think most of the artists were a little bit older teens.
Mm-hmm.
So the judges, of course, in the art contest first believed that O'Neill had cheated because she was from that poor O'Neill family.
Oh,
and she was so young.
Mm.
Can you imagine?
Yes.
Oh, she can't be the winner of this contest. She's from the poor O'Neill family.
Well, it reminds me of Jaime Escalante's. What was they made a movie about it? Was it Stand and Deliver? I may be mixing up the names, but it was about kids in East LA who were taking calculus and they didn't trust the math scores. They thought they were all cheating.
It's so terrible.
Because they did too well.
It's so terrible.
They really just had a really great teacher and the kids buckled in and really learned.
I love that.
I know. It's a
It
beautiful
sounds like a great movie. I want to check that out for sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure it was Stand and Deliver. I may have the name wrong, but the teacher was Jaime Escalante's, and it's based on a true story.
Wow, I love that. I love that. But what they did, though, of course, is they brought her in person, and then they had her draw.
Oh, well, perfect.
So it proved that she had these chops.
Incredible
she had these talents.
Yeah.
And it just didn't take much deliberating at that point to deem her work first prize.
Yay.
Worth a $5 gold coin.
Oh, boy.
It's worth about $166 now.
Okay.
Which was a lot of money in those days.
Yeah.
And basically they offered to help connect her with new publications looking for illustrators because they were so impressed.
Wow.
She's 13.
13 years old. That's really amazing.
And if you look at her artwork, her 13-year-old artwork, you will know what I'm talking about.
Well,
here.
now all going to have to, right?
She was extraordinary. And so within a couple of years, Rose's first published illustration appeared in Chicago Graphic. And from then on, O'Neill was providing illustrations for the local Omaha publications and illustrating Arabian Nights for a magazine called The Great Divide, as well as other commissions from several Midwestern publications. Having secured this work with help from that editor at the Omaha World Herald and that art director from Everybody Magazine who had judged that competition.
Wow. So they really turned things around after they saw her.
Right. And they really got on board, which was pretty amazing. They really recognized something pretty special in her. And so she also began illustrating and writing a novel that she wrote herself. It was called Callista, which was the name of one of her sisters. And the income from these publications helped support her family, which her father had struggled to support them as a bookseller. So this was pretty invaluable that suddenly
your
she was able...
daughter is helping supplement the household.
Yes, she was able to supplement the household. Not even supplement. I think she was probably the main breadwinner at that point. So O'Neill was encouraged, though, by those publishing companies to only use her last name at that time.
Because she was a woman,
Exactly.
and we didn't want to reveal that.
To disguise her gender. It was said that many of these companies were concerned that if their subscribers knew she was a female artist, God forbid, they would cancel their subscriptions.
Oh.
Can you imagine? Oh, it's a woman. We're canceling the subscription. Fuck it.
Before I knew that, I loved this person's work, but now that it's a female, let's cancel our subscription.
Who would do that?
Well,
stranger things have happened.
Stranger things, yeah.
So she signed her name O'Neill so that her gender could just remain unknown. And she also began taking drawing lessons at this point from J. Laurie Wallace, who was a realist with ties to the Art Institute of Chicago. And I don't know about this. Did that person live in the town? Certainly she wasn't taking Zoom lessons.
No, I don't think they had Zoom back then.
So she must have lived in the town or maybe was having some kind of correspondence,
Although it sounds
via
like
the
by
post
then
office. Who knows?
she had some means, so
Yeah.
there may have been an ability to travel, or
That's true. It did not mention that, so I was just curious, like, how
Interesting
she got those
question,
lessons.
yeah.
But she never finished high school, and her last grade attended is actually unknown. So at 19 years old, while still in Omaha, O'Neill met a young Virginian man named Gray Latham.
Gray Latham.
It's a nice name, isn't it?
It is a very nice name.
Gray Latham.
But is Gray Latham a nice guy?
Well, we'll get there.
All right.
She became very fond of him.
Mm-hmm.
He became very fond of her.
Mm-hmm.
And she really liked him, but she also saw that she had a big future ahead of her, which I give her a lot of credit.
Right.
Especially at that time.
Right.
And her father, even more importantly and very excitingly, also saw her potential.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "You're not going to settle down with Gray Latham. We're going to New York.
We're setting
You're
the
not gonna
world
settle
on
down
fire, kid.
You're not going to settle down with Gray Latham. We're going to New York." That's what he said. And she agreed. So he brought her to New York in that same year. And she thought at that point that maybe she should pursue writing because she knew she was a good artist. But she also knew that it might be easier to be a writer than an illustrator. She just thought that might be easier. So she was kind of open to both, but had a feeling she might end up being a writer at that point. So O'Neill once proclaimed, around this time, she said, "I have a thrilling hope that women are going to do something glorious in the arts. It is my passion conviction. I am always indignant when women are denied creative power in art. That it has not widely shown itself proves nothing. It is stupid to expect free things from a race of slaves."
Wow.
Well
From a
put.
race of slaves.
Well put.
Unfortunately, yes, it
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
So, on her way to New York, Rose and her father stopped in Chicago and they visited the World Columbian Exposition. And here she was exposed to large paintings and sculptures for her very first time in person.
Oh.
So previously she had seen this work because her dad, again, was a bookseller and she was able to
Right,
spend time with his
publications.
books. But this was the first time she saw it in person.
Oh, and that's very big.
She was completely blown away and
Aw.
inspired. So upon arriving in New York, O'Neill entered the convent of the Sisters of St. Regis in New York City. And I find this is interesting. I mean, I'm assuming, I shouldn't assume this, but I do. Her father was Irish. He was probably Irish Catholic.
Yeah.
Well, I can maybe assume that now since she entered a convent. And I think it was probably a safe bet. Let's take her to New York. Let's put her in this convent. And let's see what can happen here. She's got the protection of the nuns. She's in a safe place. But that doesn't mean she can't pursue the arts.
Okay.
So that's kind of what he aligned her with.
Did he stay with her, or
No.
he left her there?
He left her
dropped
there.
her off in the convent.
So for 3 years, she refined her drawing technique there, and the nuns helped her with additional educational training that included French lessons.
Oh.
And she also spent a good deal of time at the public library, which offered her a gateway to new knowledge and artwork. And in that same year, in 1893, she published her first book, which was called Lady in the White Veil, a book she both wrote and did the illustrations for.
Now, is this fiction? She wrote a novel, or?
Fiction.
Okay. Wow.
And you can still find it.
Well.
So the nuns pretty much right away recognized her extreme talent.
And supported it.
They supported it. So I don't know if that means they thought she could be a nun and also be an artist, or they just thought, we'll keep her here, we'll keep her safe, and we'll help support her so she can bloom into this thing she's meant to be.
Okay.
Whatever the case, they were wonderful to her. They were wonderful, and they also began to accompany her to various publishers to sell both her writing and her illustrations from her portfolio. She had 60 drawings that she had created and brought with her to New York.
Wow.
And she also took her first novel, Callista, and her illustrations for that novel along with her. And the publishers, it turned out, had no use for her novel, but they did find a fresh talent in her drawing style. And it's very funny because you can read about her showing up to these publishers, male-dominated, with all these nuns in tow.
what an image, right?
Isn't that great?
Yeah, absolutely.
So they insisted they wanted her to be safe. They wanted to go with her. So the nuns would go with her, and she would make these meetings and go to these different publications and bring both her writing and her illustrations.
And her nun entourage.
Wow.
Okay.
Do you love that?
I love it.
I love it. I can just picture it, like you said, which I love. So she was able to sell drawings to numerous publications kind of right off the bat. They were very impressed. Again, if you look at her stuff, it's so unique and beautiful. You can see she is a rare talent. And again, from the time she was very young. She sold her first drawings to Harper's Weekly, Bazaar, 20th Century Home, Collier's Weekly, and Cosmopolitan, which at that time was considered a literary magazine.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
I did not know that. Truth Magazine and something called Brooklyn Life. And she began taking orders right off the bat for more illustrations.
Wow.
So although she would publish numerous works throughout her career, she quickly impressed publishers with her drawing and was able to start a career as an illustrator, for which she was given commissions for illustrations and commercial posters. Again, right off the bat.
Wow. Was she still going by her last name O'Neill?
Yes.
Yeah. So she was still kind of hiding.
They were still
her gender.
encouraging that at this point. They were still encouraging that, yeah. And as she worked as an artist in New York, her family moved from Nebraska to a rambling 3-story, 14-room, hand-built wooden homestead in Taney County, Missouri, that Rose purchased for them.
I was wondering.
So she had enough earnings at this point that she could purchase a homestead for the rest of her large family. And when she visited her family for the first time in Missouri, O'Neill fell in love with this enchanting Ozark homestead. It was in the mountains, it had woods, it had streams, she could go horseback riding. She absolutely fell in love with that. So she named their charming homestead Bonnie Brook. I guess when you pay for it, you get to name it.
Why not?
Yeah, Bonnie Brook.
Right.
And it was said that it was her heart's true home, and she returned to it throughout her working career. Rose continued to work for high-end clients, and on September 19th, 1896, a 4-panel comic strip by O'Neill was featured in an issue of Truth magazine called The Old Subscriber Calls. It was now suddenly hailing her as the first American woman to publish a comic strip.
Oh, wow.
Yay, Rose!
And so suddenly the fact that she is female is being celebrated.
That was being celebrated for the first time.
Very good. Yay, Rose. Right.
In that same year, she did finally marry her sweetheart, old Gray Latham.
Gray Latham didn't disappear.
He didn't.
Okay.
They kind of had a long-distance relationship. And they had kept their relationship going, and when they did finally marry, Latham then moved to Bonnie Brook as opposed to joining her in New York. Because she really wanted him to help her with the family and manage the homestead, and she was also sending a lot of money to them, and she wanted him to manage that money. So that was kind of the plan, and she was going back and forth quite a bit too. So initially that was the plan. So the following year, in 1897, her success led to a full-time position with Puck, the esteemed humor magazine known for its political satire and anecdotes. O'Neill was hired as the first woman cartoonist on its all-male staff, and she remained the only woman staff there for 6 more years.
Wow.
That's pretty prestigious.
That is pretty
especially at that
impressive,
time.
Right? Yeah.
So hundreds of her illustrations for Puck depicted women and minorities in strong leadership in intellectual roles. And she earned a reputation as a sought-after illustrator known for her fast quality work, also drawing for magazines such as Ladies' Home Journal, Good Housekeeping. And O'Neill didn't have any one style or method, said one of her colleagues at Puck. She was just so versatile. That's why the publishers loved her. It could be really cutesy.
Like a Kewpie doll?
Yeah, like a Kewpie doll. It could be very cutesy, but then she could also draw some very strong and bold and make it look like something a man artist would have drawn at that time, more masculine style art.
Yeah.
So that kind of made her invaluable. And she could still go by O'Neill when she needed to.
Right.
So she continued to sometimes go by O'Neill depending on what she was drawing. And she said, though, of her time at Puck that her mistake was allowing those literary editors to add funny gag lines to her pieces. She later admitted that she had lost control of her art, with the men editors deciding what those funny comments were going to be under her illustrations. And she didn't necessarily agree with them. So she kind of looked back at that later in life as something she really regretted.
That
because
makes sense.
she thought that, she really went out of her way to make these drawings, like I said earlier, that really spoke to minorities, spoke to people suffering in poverty, the common man, but yet when the magazine got a hold of them, they were able to kind of sometimes turn them into something else just with a simple comment. And she realizes that really, in retrospect, upset her.
Yeah, well, I could see it on two levels. One is usually artists want creative control over how their work is interpreted and published, but also I'm thinking that maybe because of her sensitivity to the poor, the downtrodden, and the plight of women, that if some of that humor was deprecating to...
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it didn't say it was deprecated per se, but I can imagine.
Yeah, because what else do white guys make fun of?
Yeah, a bunch of white dudes in the early 20th century.
Right.
But determined to become an illustrator in a field dominated by males, she was lucky that she was hired in the first place.
Unfortunately.
Her choices were kind of nil, and she was very grateful that she had been given the opportunity she was given.
And that makes sense. Even today, I think that a lot of people who have steady work as a creative are very grateful and appreciative.
Of course. And, she continued to be very mindful of her duty to her impoverished family that she had left behind. And her obligations required her to yield, unfortunately, to the men who held the reins of her career, and as you'll see later, as well as the men that she grew to love.
Okay.
Unfortunately. Yeah.
Dun, dun, dun. We see what's coming.
Right. But at 23 years old, she was now earning top dollar for her work, making her one of the highest paid illustrators in New York City.
Wow.
It's pretty amazing.
That is impressive. That is something.
Yeah, and to note, she produced more than 700 cartoons for Puck between 1896 and 1903.
Wow.
Pretty remarkable.
Pretty prolific, yeah.
So again, she continued to go back and forth between New York and the Ozarks and at Bonnie Brook. And within just a few years, she became kind of unhappy with Gray Latham.
Not
you can imagine.
Surprised. We were waiting for it. Somehow, when you said his name, I knew this wasn't going to be good.
It's kind of riding on her coattails, as you can imagine. He was living
sure.
large.
Go live in my family home that I bought and manage my money.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And he was living large and gambling, and she found that Latham, with his very expensive taste, had spent her paycheck solely on himself.
Oh.
And not on her family.
Uh-oh.
So she was pissed off as hell, and she filed for divorce in 1901.
Good. Get rid of the guy.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, I didn't find much more information about this, but Latham died that same year, and some sources state that O'Neill was widowed.
Huh.
So it's hard to say if she divorced him before he died, or...
It was in process, maybe?
Yeah, who knows? Huh? Who knows? But in late 1901, O'Neill began receiving affectionately written anonymous letters and gifts in the mail.
Oh.
I would imagine she had so many admirers.
Well, you've already declared your love for her.
I'm in love with her. I'm in love with her. She learned that they were sent by a gentleman named Harry Leon Wilson, who is a novelist, humorist, and an editor at Puck, the magazine that she was working at. So O'Neill and Wilson became romantically involved soon after, and they ended up marrying in 1902.
Well, I could tell by the way you're speaking about him that he's a nicer guy.
Yeah, he was a nicer guy.
Good.
And after divorcing Latham and marrying Harry Leon Wilson, Rose stated that she would never again attach someone else's name to her art, because I don't think I mentioned this, but during her marriage she had gone by O'Neill Latham for a while. Remember how she had been O'Neill? And then when she got married, she became O'Neill Latham. So she never used her second husband's name in her art, which was very progressive at that time.
Oh, very.
I mean, she divorced too. That was super progressive.
Yeah, definitely.
She's a very progressive woman.
Very woman, right? And very non-traditional right from the start.
Oh yeah, with the encouragement of her family, which I love.
And the nuns.
And the nuns.
Right. I love
that. Was the thing that they said, that no matter what, people couldn't help but to love her when they met her. So it didn't matter what her agenda was. People loved her from the moment they met her. She had just this pure, loving heart, and she was just warm and affectionate and effusive, and it was really hard not to just love her. So anyway, after a honeymoon in Colorado, she and Wilson moved to Bonnie Brook, back to Bonnie Brook.
Back to Bonnie Brook.
And they lived there for the next several years. And during that time, Wilson wrote 2 novels, The Lions of the Lord in 1903 and The Boss of Little Arcady in 1905, both of which O'Neill drew illustrations for. So they kind of became a good team. He was also a writer, and she ended up drawing the illustrations and getting full credit.
Good.
Unlike some men we know.
We approve.
And then in 1904, she published her novel, The Loves of Edwy, which brought more recognition to her writing and illustrative talents. And again, he was very encouraging of that as well. So Wilson, too, continued to write, and in Wilson's later novel, Ruggles of Red Gap, it became extremely popular and was made into several motion pictures, including a silent movie and a talkie, starring Charles Laughton, and then a remake called Fancy Pants. Fancy Pants.
Fancy Pants.
A Midwesterner. Starring Lucille Ball and Bob Hope. So it was nice that he was also having success.
Yeah.
And wasn't a hanger-on.
Right. Riding her coattails.
Like frickin' Gray Latham.
Right.
So O'Neill also gathered countless honors, including being selected into the prestigious Société des Beaux-Arts in Paris in 1906 and becoming the first woman elected as a fellow of the New York Society of Illustrators.
Impressive.
Again, very impressive.
Yeah.
Huge. But according to O'Neill's later autobiography, things had begun to unravel and deteriorate on Rose's home front. Unfortunately, her second husband, as much as a good guy as he was, because that's really the sense I got, but he was quite haunted by his demons. He appears to have suffered from major depression at a time when there was little relief, when people didn't talk about it, and over time his melancholy just became incompatible with Rose's effervescent personality.
Yeah, I can imagine.
The black cloud.
Right.
Yeah. So they ended up
the
divorcing.
Shining Star.
Yeah. They divorced in 1907. So, kind of sad.
Yeah.
But they did remain friends, which was good.
Nice.
But she never had any children from either of her marriages or otherwise. So O'Neill often worked, though, from Bonnie Brook, as her New York offices at Puck, believe it or not, did not have restrooms for women.
I believe it.
It's so effed up. I mean, I know she was the only woman employee, but come on.
But that's a very common theme. We've heard that even in the 50s and 60s in certain settings.
It's ridiculous.
That it was so
ridiculous.
presumed that women weren't meaningful employees. You didn't need a restroom.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you could look at it the other way. She was a remote worker before that was even a thing.
There you go. She was. Let's just say that. She was a remote worker.
And she got to work from her large home that she purchased, and I'm sure...
be around her family.
And
she
be
loved
with
it
her
there. She
family.
actually loved it there.
So,
So
you
that's
know,
the silver lining.
That is the silver lining.
Yeah. Remember that movie Hidden Figures, which I
Yes.
freaking love?
Right.
There's that great scene where she has to go to the bathroom so bad and there's no bathroom for her.
And I think that was,
She has to run like 12 miles to get to the bathroom.
And
oh my
although,
God.
we have to be careful with movies because they're, they curate and glorify and maybe exaggerate and fabricate, as we know, as we've talked about. On the other hand, I think that it really brings to light something very important about the fact that bathrooms for females was a thing.
Yes, O'Neill worked remotely, often from Bonnie Brook, says Linda Brewster, who has written 3 books on O'Neill. While in Bonnie Brook in 1909, O'Neill would illustrate her most lasting and famous creation, Kewpies.
Kewpies.
A unique mix of cute and creepy, which is right up Missy's alley.
Right? It is a great description for what you love. Cute and creepy.
Missy loves cute and creepy.
So Missy has some dolls, and they are truly terrifying. Like, they make horror movies after dolls like this. They're baby dolls.
To be loved.
She has baby dolls in a cage, in a bird cage.
It's true, but
they're
a gift. She's beautiful.
All right, yeah. Beauty is in the eyes of the beholder.
It's true.
I digress.
I do like the combination of cute and creepy. I have to say,
You definitely
do. And I love to collect kind of unfortunate toys that nobody else will love.
Unfortunate toys.
Yeah.
Well, that's a Kewpie
Misfit
doll,
toys,
right?
because-
I used to think Kewpie dolls were like voodoo dolls.
You did?
A little bit. A little bit. They have a little bit of that.
Voodoo dolls. That's interesting. They're so smiley and cute, though.
Well, they are. They're like half cherub, half terrifying. You know?
I never found them terrifying.
Okay.
But I do appreciate that combination or that description. But Ladies' Home Journal at this point suggested that O'Neill create some kind of character and something with staying power. And she was commissioned to do so at that point.
Great.
So O'Neill is quoted as saying, "I just dreamed them one day. I was in bed.
Ooh.
Suddenly they were bouncing over the cover, chirping. One perched in my hand like a bird. It wasn't warm like a human baby. It was oddly cool. So I knew they weren't babies, but they were elves."
They were elves. Yeah, they were elf-like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I said to them, "You say you're called Kewpies? Short for Cupids?" I asked. And they nodded their little heads.
Oh, this is interesting.
I want to have that dream.
Yeah.
Kewpies were fanciful, and Rose considered them both impish and kind, and she decided that they solved all kinds of problems in humorous ways. O'Neill described them as sort of little round fairies whose one idea is to teach people to be merry and kind at the same time. Kewpies also believed in doing good deeds in funny ways. So the Kewpies were immediately popular with both children and adults.
Aww.
I love it. Those Kewpies leapt from her dreams onto the pages of Ladies' Home Journal's Christmas issue that year. The cherub little characters sprawled across an entire page, accompanied by a story written by O'Neill called The Kewpies' Christmas Frolic.
The Kewpie Christmas Frolic.
Do you
Love it.
freaking love that? Adults and children alike became enamored with the drawings and the story. Magazines clamored for a chance to publish Kewpie cartoons, along with O'Neill's stories and verses about them, and soon they emblazoned commercial products too, everything from Jell-O ads to candy to clocks. Rose also created advertisements for Kellogg's Corn Flakes,
Oh, wow.
Colgate. She created more than 100 advertisements for Jell-O alone.
Wow.
And to this day, people still use Kewpie mayonnaise. We say mayonnaise in the Midwest, but I'm going to say mayonnaise for this podcast. And it's done with a Kewpie graphic, and it's considered a prized mayo from Japan. Go look at the pictures. It's so cute. I might even have to order some now that I saw. I didn't know about Kewpie mayo, but now I do.
Now you do.
Yeah. I remember when I was a little kid, my mom got me this little, it was this green clock, and it had a Kewpie on it. And it was a little device to learn how to tell time. So you could move the hands on it. And both my kids used it as well because I kept it. I keep everything.
Because you keep everything. Missy is not a minimalist.
I keep everything, but certain things are very special. And my little Kewpie learning how to tell time device was very important. So I still have that. And O'Neill's career, of course, began to take off, and folks just became more and more hungry for her Kewpies. So the Women's Home Journal asked at this point that she turn them into a reoccurring comic strip. And the story format, of course, allowed O'Neill to experiment with the Kewpie's mischievous elf-like nature. Side note, as educational opportunities were made available in the 19th century, women artists became part of professional enterprises, and some founded their own art associations at this point.
Progression finally.
Yes. And I think that Rose was a big leader in this.
Sounds like it.
So artwork made by women was initially considered to be inferior, automatically, because it was made by a woman, of course. So to help overcome these stereotypes, women became, according to art historian Laura Prito, increasingly vocal and confident in promoting women's works. Many women artists, including O'Neill, could be characterized as examples of the educated, modern, and independent new woman, a form of gender identity that emerged at that time. According to Prito, artists played crucial roles in representing the new woman, both by drawing images of the icon and exemplifying this emerging type through their own lives. In the late 19th century and early 20th century, about 88% of the subscribers of 11,000 magazines and periodicals were women. They were women.
That makes sense, actually.
Yeah. So as women entered this artist community, publishers started to hire women, finally realizing what was going on. to create illustrations that depicted the world from a woman's perspective.
Well, it's about time, considering women are such powerful influencers of consumerism and home and just
Hells yeah.
a lot of areas of life.
Hells
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that just things started to come together at the right time for Rose, and the fact that she was just brilliant.
Well, she was at the forefront since she was 13.
Yeah, exactly.
She just broke through and never looked back.
And remember how I said that she was still friends with her ex-husband, her second husband, Harry Leon Wilson. So he really encouraged her at this point to copyright and patent the Kewpie.
Oh, good for Harry. Yay.
He was a good business person. He had been an editor at Puck, and they were still friends, and he said to her, Rose, time to copyright. This is really important, and she did it. And then she began to sell those rights for commercial use at that point.
I love it.
So soon, Kewpies were seen enjoying ice cream cones on billboards. You know, they were, again, eating Jell-O.
When I was a young kid, and I'm in my 60s, they were the rage. They were very popular.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they were popular for a very long time.
Yeah.
And O'Neill's Kewpie cartoon character began to serve as a vehicle from which she could comment on social issues of importance such as women's rights, discrimination, and wealth inequality.
Well, I have to admit, I never thought of Kewpies in quite that way. But
go look at some of these advertisements.
I will.
And she didn't, because the Kewpies were so disarming. That's what's amazing. You look back at some of these commercial pieces, they were so cute and disarming that she could honestly put any message she wanted to, and nobody would second guess it.
What a powerful medium! I never thought
it really.
Of it that
I had
way.
no. Again, this is something I had no idea. I didn't quite realize. I'm actually going to post a couple of those on our Instagram because I came across a couple of those ads, and I just thought I've just got to post these because they're so significant.
Please do.
Yeah, and the figuration of the Kewpie remains to this day, of course, an international sensation, and through her art and public service, she just championed this total downtrodden society, you know, a condition that she was all too familiar with from having grown up and suffered that indignity of poverty as a child. Also, the Actors Fund of America utilized O'Neill's art on the front cover of their programs for their fundraising efforts during years from 1910 to 1924. Little side note again. And she also joined donors and organizers of that fund in supporting young actors through financial resources for training and schooling in the performing arts. And her involvement in the 1911 New York Child Welfare exhibit also came as no surprise, since her art regularly focused again on the plight of children in the streets along with those struggling in poverty. Her participation included donations of illustrations for visual exhibits, and the purpose of these exhibits was described, "Let us try to arrange matters so that no child in New York shall miss his rightful chance to grow up through a happy and well-balanced childhood into the useful, interesting work of adult life."
Wow.
So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And that philanthropy toward impoverished children continued throughout her life. So also in 1911, O'Neill's fashion illustrations were published in the March Good Housekeeping article featuring fashion comments from the views of distinguished artists to answer the question, are women's fashions ugly? Are they ugly? So O'Neill's illustrations and article referenced corsets. And she said, when a woman runs again on noble flat feet and bends like Atlanta, stooping for the golden apples, she will be beautiful once more, as of old. Do you love that?
I love that.
I know we've covered a lot because I have gone down the rabbit hole. I admit that. I fully admit that.
And
I think because of that, by that token.
Yes, we know you're only half done.
Yes. We're going to have to break this into two.
We are definitely going to have to.
It's the first time. It's a historical moment in the SheelaNaGig podcast.
Yes, it's the
We
first
have to
time.
break this into two-part episode.
Definitely.
Is it a two-part episode?
It's
yes,
a two-part.
It is.
Yeah, it's a two-part.
So, signing off. Thank you for listening.
Join us next time.
Give us your questions. Give us your comments. We love you.
We'd love to hear it.
Please let us know.
And more to come.
More to come. Please listen in next week for part 2 of Rose O'Neill.
SheelaNaGig, unabashed in your